Okay, problem 22. Problem 22. What's the first step say to do?
Get those fractions out of there.
Get rid of the fractions. Get rid of the fractions. Now, one perfectly correct, absolutely acceptable way to get rid of the fractions is if you happen to subtract 1/2 from both sides, that's going to leave 2/2 over here. And 2/2 is just equal to 1. That's not a fraction. And you see us have 9y equals 1. That's what's going to happen. I'm going to do something a little funky because while this works in this particular problem, what I'm going to do next will work every time. And so while it looks a little more complicated in this problem, I'll admit it, it's a harder way to do this problem. It's something that works every time. And the thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, look, there's a 2. I'm going to look at one fraction at a time. So this fraction is the first one I want to get rid of. That fraction has a 2 downstairs. If I multiplied this fraction by 2/1, that would make this 1, and then get rid of it. Now, I can't just choose to multiply this fraction by 2/1. But what I can do is multiply both sides of the equal sign by 2/1. That I can do. What that does for me, well, the first term is going to be 2 times 9y, 18y. The next term is going to be 2/1 times 1/2, and 2/1 times 1/2 is just 1. And this is going to be 3/2 times 2, which will end up being 3. So we happened this time to get rid of all the fractions in one fell swoop because there was a common denominator. Sometimes it will take doing that twice. You'll do it to get rid of this fraction and do it to get rid of the next fraction. When they have the same denominator, or if you happen to know a common denominator right off, you can multiply and get rid of them in one easy step. So I've gotten rid of my fractions. Now what? What does it say to do next? What's step 2? What's step 2? Parentheses. Okay? I don't have the sheet in front of me. That's why I need somebody to read step 2 for me. So step 2 talks about parentheses. Are there any parentheses left in this problem? No. What does step 3 say? Gather like terms on each side of the equal sign. So there are no stray like terms. There's one constant term and one variable term on each side, or most one constant term and most one variable term on each side of the equal sign. So that step 3 is taken care of. What about step 4? What does step 4 say to do?
Make sure x is on only one side of the equal sign.
Make sure basically there's only x on one side of the equal sign, or the variable on one side of the equal sign. And that's again the case here in all these problems I've done on this board. In fact, the y term is already on one side. There's not a y here and a y here. There's just a y over on the one side. So that's the next thing. What's the next step?
I gotta get rid of that 1.
We have to get rid of that 1. Again, I'm trying to refer to the steps on the sheet just so we stay consistent with that.
That would be it.
That would be it. Basically get so 18y is all by all, so we want the variables on one side, constants on the other. How do we fix the 1 here? How do we get rid of it? We subtract 1, except for we do it on this side, we have to do it on this side. So now we're left with 18y equals 2. Now what do I do? Divide by what?
9.
2.
18.
Oh yeah, this is where people get confused, but again, the secret is focus on this side. This side where your y is. You're trying to get all alone. What's going to make that just plain y? Divide by what? 18. Dividing by 18 is going to make that just plain y. But if we divide this side by 18, we have to divide this side by 18. focus on this side first, what needs to be done, and then just make sure you do the same thing to both sides. That leaves us with y equals 2 over 18, simplifies down to 1 over 9. This is 2 over 2 times 9, and the 2's cancel. We're left with 1 over 9. Problem 24. Problem 24. Negative 0.8y plus 64 equals negative 32. What's the first step say to do again? First step says clear fractions. And a decimal is just a different way of writing a fraction. How would we get rid of this being a decimal type number? What can we do to this term? Multiply it by 10. But if we multiply this by 10, we have to multiply both sides of the equal side by 10. We don't get away with just multiplying a single term. As, what's your name again? Ryan said, we have to multiply everything by 10, not just a single term. So, 10 times negative 0.8y becomes negative 8y. 10 times 64 becomes 640. 10 times negative 32 becomes negative 320. All right. So now we've cleared the fractions. What does step 2 say? Clear the parentheses. We don't have any parentheses. We're done. Step 3. What does step 3 say? Gather like terms on each side. So there's no like term problem here so far. What does step 4 say? Yeah, make sure the variable's only on one side, and we do that by adding and subtracting. We'll see later. So this has x only on one side, or a variable only on this side. What does it say to do next?
Make sure coefficient is on, well, the constants are one side.
Get the constants on the other side. So this is the constant that's on the wrong side. How do we make that go away? Just focusing on this. Ignore these two for the moment. How do we make this go away? Subtract 640. But if we subtract 640 on this side, we have to subtract 640 on this side. And that leaves us with negative 8y equals negative 960. Now, we want to make sure the coefficient of y, the number in front of y, is 1. How do we do that? Dividing by negative 8. But if we do that to this side, we got to do that to this side too. And so I've got y equals negative divided by a negative is going to be what sign? Positive. And 960 divided by 8 is going to be, let's see, 120.